Loud enough? Too loud? Is everything okay? It'll help me get through this. Yeah, so it's a real privilege and an honor to be with you here today. It's my first experience with AmCham, although I've followed you a little bit on Facebook and have seen some of other folks who I know come through and speak here. And so I was really quite happy to be invited to speak to you here today. I put together a presentation to talk to you a little bit about what I consider to be the main things happening in the marketing and advertising and brand space in digital. I speak a lot to publishers, also in an educational way. Today I'm really going to try to focus on what it means for you in terms of the business side of things here, specifically in Austria. To give you a little background, not that the introduction was fantastic, we just left out one bit at the beginning, which is that I was born and raised in Rochester, New York. That's an upstate. I'm not sure if you may have heard of it. That small company called Kodak is from there. They're the company that had all the patents for digital technology, for digital photography, and sat on those patents for 30 years and are currently being disrupted out of business. And so my family worked for that business. I had a few cousins and an uncle that were there. They all lost their jobs. And so somehow this idea of digital disruption has been a first-hand learning as well along the way. We're all fine, by the way. Kodak, not so much, but we're doing okay. This is does anybody know what this is? This is the first banner that was ever on the internet. This is 1994. And it was done by an agency in New York that was part of a family of agencies that I worked for. And it was done for a magazine called Hotwired, which is now Wired magazine, and it was for AT&T. And the thing about it is our industry, the marketing and advertising industry online, in a lot of places hasn't really evolved much past this. I thought I'd show you a little bit of how things are evolving elsewhere. First. So I'll call this little section, that was then, and this is now. So, this is the Wikipedia in 1888. And think about how far things have come in such a short period of time. And once we had libraries, and now this is what we have. This is where we've become. This is the iPad. 1944. And when people tell you that digital technology makes you antisocial because you have your head down all the time, think about pictures like this, and you'll realize that it has more to do with human behavior than it does to do with technology. And you can almost argue that those of us who are interacting with other people on our mobile phones are more social these days than the people who are head down in their magazines and newspapers. But that's another talk for another day. This is WhatsApp in 1955. And for those of you who are familiar with it, if they were eating the notes, it would be Snapchat. That is my best joke of the day. On a more somber note, this is the New York Times in 1996 when I was working there. It hasn't changed too much, as you'll see. But that's what we did. And we funded the business with 2 small banner ads. You can see here. A few years later, in 2014, the sad day that Ben Bradley died, I took a snapshot of this because I respect Mr. Bradley and for some reason kept this, but then it got me thinking that actually there's that one banner ad that's funding their business, and it reminded me a lot of this particular banner, and I said, well, we've got Wikipedia, we've got the iPad, we've got WhatsApp, and we've got the publishing industry. How is it possible? How is it possible that happens? Today, there's an equal chance of getting hit by lightning as clicking on a banner ad. Think about it. When was the last time you purposely clicked on a banner ad? When was the last time you... Hands up if you've purposely clicked on a mobile banner ad within the last month. On a mobile device. Or in the last year on a mobile device. And when you do that, when you accidentally click on those mobile ads, what's the first thing you do? You go, back, back, please, God, no, get back. And so it's an accident when you click on them. And somehow it's an accidental business model that we've developed. And there's no future in it. There's no future in it at all. There's 200 million people a month plus using an ad blocker. Ad blocker is that technology that's all. How many of you here use an ad blocker? Which is amazing, because if we'd asked this question a couple of years ago, I don't think we would have seen this. I gave this talk at TED, and we had 2,000 kids that were mostly, I'd say average age 24. It was 99% of the group. And on mobile devices, like I said, it's even worse. Facebook. And like I said, on mobile, it's even worse. So I'd like to do a quick experiment to demonstrate the point. How many of you here have a mobile device with you? Can I see them? Can you open them? Can you unlock them? Unlock your phones. Now take that unlocked phone and hand it to your neighbor. I'm serious. Hand it to your neighbor. Do me the favor. Hand the unlocked phone to your neighbor. Now wait with me for a minute. Good, they're doing it. It's great. Now, do you feel what I'm feeling? Do you feel the angst? Do you understand how vital? What else do you feel like this with? What other things do we have in life that make us feel this way? What else could you give people? Your credit cards? They need the codes. Your car keys? Maybe. I'm not sure what else in terms of devices. Maybe people or your wife or something like that. Maybe. But in terms of a thing, there's nothing more precious that we have today that has more meaning than the device that you just handed to your neighbor. Okay, now give them all back. But we haven't figured out how to make a business model out of it yet. We haven't sorted it out. We have this thing that is close and near and dear to us, but yet we've not gotten there. Anyway, for more, if you're curious about it, go check out my talk. It's called "What If There Was No Advertising." It goes into this topic a bit more. Plus, I could use the YouTube hits, so feel free. So I'd like, if the sound works, I'd like 2 minutes and 50 seconds of your attention to demonstrate the point. And I hope this works. And if you've all seen the video, then we could make it less than 2 minutes and 50 seconds, in case you have. And I'm not sure if the sound's going to play. Go. So, sorry, better. So in under 3 minutes time, with no words whatsoever, if you didn't know the city that we're living in, this beautiful place that we're in, if you saw this, you'd be able to tell a story about the city that we're here, that we live in. You'd have something to take away. You'd have some sense of what it is that we have here via a piece of advertising, a piece of marketing. And I think that people would pay attention to this particular piece of content, and it breaks through a few of the barriers that we have in terms of marketing and advertising. The counterpoint to this is this. I'm going to stand here for 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
No, please don't.
That's the point.
Or worse.
Stand here for, 2 minutes and 10 seconds. How long would you spend with this? This is the dramatic difference in the state of the market that we're in today. On one side, we have storytelling and the ability to create emotion around topics, travel, tourism, whatever it might be. And on the other side, to throw stuff in people's faces and say, please click here and do something. You know, visit this banner, hopefully you get the keyword and off you go. And the people, this is why no one clicks on stuff. This is why it's just as much as kind of getting hit by lightning. Because it's boring and it gets in our way and it disturbs our process. Versus content that tells stories that actually has some kind of purpose. Armin would say this. So I'd like to talk to you really quickly about what I've discovered working with Monocle Magazine, with Metropole Magazine on an article I'm writing with them, with Meg Jobs, who's here today. And I've named it, since we've met last, the Mercer Monocle Deloitte Dilemma. And it's an interesting theory. And the theory goes like this. In Austria, we are consistently rated of having the highest quality of life standards in the world. We rank either number 1 or number 2 in almost every survey out there. It is fantastic for the reputation of this fantastic city. That's one of the reasons why I really wanted to come back, because it's so awesome. We have a nostalgia that trumps nostalgia. We have a history and art scene and low crime, all the things that add up to a really comfortable lifestyle. But at the same time, if that's helping people come in and bring people into this city or into this country, it has an opposite effect for those of us that are here. Why change? Why do anything? It's really nice. Why would I ever change what I've got when it's already here so nice? And Deloitte, in their 2016 radar study, actually supported it, which surprised me, because we were looking around for some data to this wild theory of mine, and up comes Deloitte and says this. I won't read the German because it would embarrass me. I embarrass myself too much. But the point is that they say that it takes away from the courage of making changes because of that we're too comfortable. And so I like to try. I've told people for years that we can't invent the future by investing in the past. But I've tweaked it. I've changed it a little bit since this theory. And actually, it's to protect our past. We have to invest in the future. It sounds like a strange idea, but I think that's the only way forward, especially from a digital perspective, especially in this world where things are changing at a high rate of speed and quite quickly. If we don't catch up, if we don't innovate our way out of the situation, then we will lose those nice things that we have, because the competition doesn't really care. Two quick charts. I could go on about this for a long time, but one of the signals, for example, is coming from America. And it's about television usage. Right now, if you're 50 plus, you're 50 years old or more in the United States, you're normal. Your television behavior is the same as it's always been. Your consumption patterns are pretty stable, and you have a relatively normal pattern. It's trickling over into Europe in about the same state, in the same kind of way. But for other demographics, especially the younger users, from both a linear perspective, but also from a what do you call it, from a direct television viewing perspective, they're dropping out. We're losing viewers. And we're losing it to digital, we're losing it in all kinds of places, but yet, at the same time, while some of the budgets have started to shift in the States for marketing and advertising, here in Europe, and definitely here in Austria, despite the shifting landscape of the media market, the budgets haven't followed. I was talking to Alex just now about a new mobile service that the ORF is going to put out called 100 Seconds. Or
Zip 100.
Zip 100. So it's going to be 100 seconds long. It's going to come out on mobile. Now, they have tax-funded support, but for a publicly supported company, that's possible. But for the privates that are out there, if you look at the money that it would take to fund a new mobile product in the Austrian landscape, I would argue it would be very, very difficult. Because the courage and the investment hasn't caught up to the usage, which is a shame, because it's a complete missed opportunity in the market. We talk about Austria being a print land. I was 4 years in career. I had to memorize this statement. It was part of my homework. But actually, one of the reasons is that we're 7 years older. Austria is the sixth oldest country by median age in the world. The average career subscriber is 57 years old. The average manager across the border in Germany is 10 years younger than here in Austria. And it has a total effect on the way we manage and the way we think and what it is that we're doing in that idea of defending the past versus inventing or investing in the future. So, moving on with our analogy of that was then and this is now. This is David Ogilvy. Found Ogilvy and Mather, a genius in the field, kind of the real Don Draper, right? The guy who actually did it. And he did advertisements like this, which were relatively well accepted, pretty straightforward. American Airlines had a new senior luxury travel offer, and they put it on with a nice design, and off it would go into a full page. It was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There was a little bit of television, there was a bunch of radio, and there was a ton of print. And that was all they really had to deal with. And so they had new products, Scotch Guard for the carpets so they wouldn't get dirty. It was like the first time ever, and a gas stove. I mean, they could literally sell stuff for the first time. How hard is it to sell a gas stove for the first time when no one had them before? Right? So it was pretty easy. But he had a way with words. It was really good. I don't know if you've seen this before. Maybe it's kind of a landmark ad. It's a little bit of a play on words for the Beatle when it launched in the States. And it gave him a bit of a resume. But what Ogilvy also discovered, and what I really think is interesting from the 60s, is he, looking back, we talk a lot about native advertising and content marketing these days. Maybe some of you have kind of heard of this stuff. Ogilvy discovered the power of native advertising 45, 50 years ago by positioning advertisements in a way that they feel more like content. And examples of that are the Hathaway shirt in the Hathaway campaign, another landmark campaign of its time, and his work for Rolls-Royce, placed in newspapers and magazines across the country as editorial way back then. And that's kind of what we're doing today with native advertising and content marketing. But it's just a little bit more complicated, that's the problem. So this is now. Now, that ecosystem that we're working in, or that maybe you're working in, looks like this, right? And we have audio and visual, so it's TV, direct TV, satellite television, often online, satellite radio. We have experiential with festivals and cause marketing and everything that's outdoor. We have print, obviously, with magazines, newspapers, brochures, leaflets, etc. Out of home, mobile devices, place-based, so in-store, as well as malls and shopping and the rest, direct marketing, a whole world of public relations that's out there. I mean, an ecosystem in and of itself, right? And online, obviously, with websites and online advertising and video casting and search and gaming and e-commerce, email, blogs, a relatively complicated landscape, to say nothing of social networking, which in and of itself, you could say social networking by itself, you could take on the whole, but I think some people would actually say that Facebook, with 1.5 billion people using it many times a day, is its own thing. Not even social media anymore, it's its own thing. And in a couple of years, it's going to be Snapchat, with 900 million, 700 million people using it, and 7 billion videos a day. But the traditional media will say it's all about kids doing sexting, but it's not true. You just go ask a 14-year-old to show you Snapchat, and I can't. I have no idea. I just watch, But that's definitely where it's going. Anyway, so the ecosystem itself has become much more complicated, and the only thing that's tying it together are the customers, our users, our people. And the only way you can achieve some way of a cohesive strategy of understanding those people is having a true customer-centric strategy that's based on data. Because digital is about data. It's where it all goes. It all comes back to how you gather enough data to get to know the people that you're working with in a good way. And one of the people that knows about that is Jeff. Right? It's Jeff Bezos, a guy who self-founded his own company, a thing called Amazon, and then discovered that fantastic algorithm that helps people say, people who like this, like that. That's the whole gist of Amazon's basic business. And then he applied that when he recently bought the Washington Post as a toy for $250 million, which wasn't really a lot for him when you think about how much it's really worth. But in a very short period of time, he bought the Washington Post in 2013, and since then, the red line, they've overtaken the New York Times, and they're competing with BuzzFeed on an international level, which is astounding, considering that this was a paper that no one really expected to break out of its shell, but it's becoming an international brand. And I don't know if you read a lot of English speaking stuff here, if you use it on your mobile phone, or if you use Facebook quite a bit, but I personally, at least, I've seen it popping up more and more as a result of some very cool work that they're doing. And I'll try to show you a little bit what I think that they're doing. Another company that's doing it is Spotify. How many people here use Spotify? How many people have tried Spotify Discover, the playlists? How many people, is it as good for you guys as it is for me? It's amazing, right? I've waited 15 years for something like this, that somehow this thing knows me and gives me 3 or 4 new tracks every single week where I'm like, how did they know? Right? And they know because of data. And they know because of data not just about me, but lots of other people like me. And so what they do, rather than read you this is their chief marketing officer, I've tried to highlight a couple of things. So they know that data is a part of their storytelling. They use that data to create narratives and stories around specific people. They triangulate the data from me and other people to create an environment where they can capture that information and then create recommendations. That sounds pretty straightforward. It's a bit more complicated to do it, but that's the way they come up with a product like Spotify Discover, which is, like I said, for me, a quantum leap forward in the ability of not just having an interesting service, but a reason to keep paying and a reason to stay. Because it differentiates it from everything else that's out there on the market, because they're harnessing the power of data. Other little businesses that are in the music space that are doing that, or Record Bird, or Songkick, you don't need to know about them, but they do similar things. What they do, and I promise not to spend too long on this because it will bore you and it will probably complicate things. If you're interested in it, I'm happy to talk to you offline about this over a coffee sometime. But basically, you create a bunch of content. And instead of creating the same piece of content for everybody, you create versions of that content. 5 different stories about a similar topic. 5 different stories about coming to Vienna. 1 for a business traveler, 1 for a family of 4, 1 for a single person, 1 for somebody that's under 25. And because you can use modern technology in measuring how long people would stay on one piece of content or another, how much they would click on one compared to the other, how long they would scroll on one of those articles, how long they would stay in total. You start gathering enough data to make a profile to be able to say, we're pretty sure that that's the father of 2. And we're pretty sure that's the mother of 4, that's the single person. And then magically, you put it into your CRM system, maybe with a little bit of login data if you're selling things. You've sold a weekend spa trip for 2, you get a better signal, a more direct signal, and that allows you to create an offer or whatever it is you want to say, we think we should be giving this content to this person or this offer to that person, as opposed to something that's more generic. Now, coming out of the publishing biz all, one newspaper for everyone. And if you think about what Facebook is doing these days, when there's a story to be told on Facebook, sadly, Prince died, right? There's everybody talking about that on Facebook today. Every publisher that's out there is telling that story. But yet, the story that you get will come from the FAZ or from the Stadler, and inside of Austria, probably from a selection of 6 or 7 different publishers. Facebook knows which one you're more likely to be reading, as opposed to the person next to you. And so there might be one Standard and one Presse and one Courier. There's 1.5 billion Facebooks. And that's the trick. It's really, really hard. But that's the trick. They've found a way to individualize a service that looks as though it's something for everybody, but actually it's just for you. And that's magic. That's how they create Spotify Discover. That's Jonah Peretti. Jonah's the founder of BuzzFeed. You know, those guys who own cats, except they don't do cats, they do hard news, they break stories, they're massive. But Jonah did something very smart. He hired Dow, and Dow was their first data scientist, and she doubled the traffic of the business within 2 years, and BuzzFeed's traffic was already pretty significant, and then they made her the publisher. So the publisher of BuzzFeed, in its traditional sense, the publisher, the Herausgeber, is a data scientist, because it works. Because that's where it's at. That's where they're finding these signals. I'd encourage you, and I'll share some slides or some links or something like that, but I would encourage you, if you're interested in the topic, to go to Fast Company and check out this article. It's fascinating. But at the end of the day, it's all about bringing the strategy and data and technology together in order to get to know your consumers. That's the trick. Instead of unidirectional publishing or one-size-fits-all marketing, it's about combining data in a way that's more modern to get to know the people that you're working with. I call it data-driven content marketing. A lot of other people call it other things, but I think that's where it's at. There are a bunch of great examples, which I'll rapidly go through and happily share with you offline or via links. But stuff like BBC Travel. This is done for the country of New Zealand, positioned for business people on BBC. This is a campaign created by the Washington Post's brand studio for connected healthcare. This is for Samsung, a very innovative thing. It's full of motion graphics and infographics and video. This is another innovation piece for Siemens done on Time magazine. This is a piece on The Great Big Story, which is CNN's version of Vice in the United States, called Dreamers, and it's done for Hewlett Packard. This is a series from Netflix, which I really love. It's a prize-winning story about criminality in the United States that's published, that was written by Melanie Diesel, who I was on stage with yesterday here at Vienna, actually. She's 25 and knows more than I do. And she's really, really good. And she wrote this piece for Netflix when they were coming out with Orange is the New Black, their television series. They versioned, like I was talking about, making different content in different places. And so they wrote that for BuzzFeed, for example, listicle articles about the same kinds of topics, but just done in a very different way for a very different audience in a very different place. The Heineken's The Candidate. It's a fantastic piece of video. It's really neat. It's a recruiting video of all things. If I had more time, I'd show it to you, but like I said, I'll throw you the YouTube link. You'll enjoy it. It's a story of how they recruited three people to become interns at Heineken. And instead of having the same boring interview for everyone, they kind of turn the tables and did it a little bit differently. It's fascinating, it's great. And probably one of the best examples out there in terms of the field that I work in is called Beauty Inside. It's a campaign done by with Intel and Toshiba. And it's a movie. It's an 8-part movie that was developed in the United States with almost 100 million views. It became a movie in its own right in Japan as a result of that. And it tells a very unique love story of a person who wakes up in a different body every morning. And so it's how that person takes shape and lives their life, which is very strange, but because it's told in a very romantic and endearing way, but it also allowed them to bring in audience members to play those roles. So they had stars taking up the main roles of the movie, but they also recruited people from Facebook and over YouTube to actually participate in their movie and got social spread. And it went massively viral in the United States, like I said, to the point of it being created as a movie. Locally here, just to brag for a half a second, we did a piece for OMV when I was at Career called Bildung braucht Innovation. It was a campaign to help big up OMV's efforts in education for young women, University of Leoben, the Technic Queens that they sponsor, the Technical Museum that they sponsor as well, to tell some stories around it. We kind of sketched some stuff out and had some pretty good luck with the campaign, but using version content and data to find the right people at the right time with the right content. My advice is, first, don't be too scared. It's not as hard as it looks. It just takes time and some effort, but it also takes the courage of getting started. And I like to see, I look at things kind of like an iceberg, if that's your budget. And so think of the experimentation bit of your budget as the tip of the iceberg. 10%, 5-10%, something like that. That's what they're doing in Germany. And it's pretty successful. It's enough that you can fund a project that you get real data from. Instead of just clicks on YouTube or Facebook likes, you get real ROI or not on a project. You can then bring to your board or your partners and say, we were able to do something with this rather than just get additional Facebook likes, which is not where it's going. So anyway, to wrap up in the that was then and this is now. That was then. That campaign that we did for OMV won some awards. It helped build the reputation of our little digital team inside of Career by doing so. It also proved that innovation can happen in small markets like us. We competed against The Guardian, against El País, against the New York Times, and we won. And our team felt pretty good about it when it happened. But for me, it was more of a proof point that it's possible to do stuff like that. And now, if that was then this is now. As I said, I founded an agency as of January to kind of kickstart this market, to open a dialogue about the changes taking place in the digital landscape. We call ourselves the Agency for Changing Times. And we have a couple of things that we work on. The Millennial Lab, amongst which is 250 young Austrians that do design thinking workshops for brands. So getting real authentic thought into the marketplace. And a project called News Genie, which has had some funding from Google, which will bring content from the millennial generation to the millennial generation, so stuff that they've made for themselves on mobile. So that's a little bit about us. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I thank you for your time.